Hey, deep divers. You know those renewable resources you've been digging into? Farming, forestry, fishing. We're right there with you, ready to explore how we can make sure we're using these resources sustainably.
And, I think we often hear renewable and think, oh, that means it's unlimited. But your research makes it very clear that's not how it works.
Yeah, it's not like hitting the easy button on resource management.
Definitely not. Your sources had a pretty stark example. Remember the orange roughy?
Oh man, the orange roughy. Talk about a cautionary tale. It was the fish to get for a while, all fancy on menus, and then poof, gone, overfishing,
Yeah.
like we treated it as an endless supply.
Like mining, really. And speaking of overexploited delicacies, your research had some, concerning things to say about Chilean sea bass.
Right, like, are we going to lose another delicious fish because we can't get enough? So how do we stop that? How do we make sure the things we enjoy today are still around for future generations to, well, enjoy?
That's where the whole idea of sustained yield management comes into play. It's about finding that balance between our needs and nature's ability to replenish itself.
Okay, so give me the sustained yield for dummies version. How do we make sure we're not, like, overdrawing from nature's bank account?
Think of it like this. You've got a forest, right? The trees are your capital, and the interest they generate is the new growth each year. Sustained yield means we're living off the interest, not depleting the capital.
So we need to be mindful of nature's budget, making sure we're not spending more than it can handle.
Exactly. And speaking of budgets, your research takes us on a pretty wide-ranging tour here,
Mhm.
from those sprawling farmlands to the vast forests, and of course the, well, very large fish tank we call the ocean.
And let's be real, managing all that sustainably in a country as geographically diverse as Canada, that's kind of come with its own unique set of challenges. Take
Yeah.
forests, for example. Did you know Canada has the third largest forest area in the world? That's massive.
Almost unimaginable, the scale of it.
Yeah.
And then there's farming trying to manage that sustainably in a country with, let's face it, some pretty short growing seasons.
Right.
Not to mention the curveballs climate change keeps throwing our way.
It's definitely not getting any easier for Canadian farmers. And you know what else really struck me? How much farming itself has changed even just in the last century. It's mind-blowing.
It really is.
Yeah.
Your research points out that in 1921, a huge portion of Canadians were farmers. Now it's less than 2%.
Yeah, less than 2%. Like, what
It-
even? We went from small family farms to these massive operations. It's a completely different world.
Right. Those images we have of family farms passed down through generations. We're in the age of mega farms and high-tech agriculture now.
So, what does this all mean for the average person who just, likes to eat? We're going to dig into that right after this.
So we've gone from fields worked by, well, a whole lot of people, to these massive farms run by a tiny fraction of the workforce. Kind of makes you wonder about the trade-offs, like, yeah, technology can boost efficiency, but at what cost? It's a valid question. And, when it comes to sustainable resource management, your sources really emphasize this. We can't just focus on the what, the trees, the fish, the crops. We need to understand the why behind the way we manage them.
Okay, I'm listening. Why should we care about forests beyond, wanting a nice place to hike or finding a cool tree to take a selfie with?
Because forests do so much more than just look pretty. They're essential for biodiversity, acting as these amazing carbon sinks that help regulate our climate, prevent soil erosion, provide us with clean water. Not to mention they offer all these incredible recreational spaces.
Right, like we kind of take them for granted, but they're doing all this important work behind the scenes.
Exactly. And we can't forget the cultural and spiritual significance, especially for indigenous communities who've relied on them for centuries. But I think a lot of people, when they think about protecting forests, they think about those old growth giants. What makes them so special?
Yeah, why are those old trees so important to protect?
Think of old growth forests like biodiversity banks. They've been around for centuries, some even millennia, and that creates this incredibly rich and complex habitat. You just don't find that in younger forests.
So it's not just about letting trees live out their lives, it's about protecting these whole ecosystems that have taken centuries to develop.
Right, and that's where sustainable forestry practices come in. I'm sure you've seen the FSC logo. That's the Forest Stewardship Council. They have that little tree check mark.
Oh, yeah. I always look for that when I'm buying wood or paper products. It's like a quick signal that, okay, this company at least kind of cares about where they're getting their stuff from, right?
Exactly. That certification means the wood was harvested in a way that considers the health of the whole forest ecosystem. Everything from protecting biodiversity to respecting indigenous rights. It's about finding that balance between using this valuable resource and ensuring it's there for the long haul.
So it's a way for us as consumers to actually support sustainable practices. But how do you manage something as big and complicated as a forest sustainably? It seems overwhelming.
It is. Your research had this really interesting case study about Algonquin Park in Ontario.
Oh, Algonquin Park. Okay, I've actually been there. It's beautiful, all those lakes and forests. I went camping and canoeing. It was amazing. But they also have a logging industry there, which kind of blows my mind. How does that work?
That's the cool thing about Algonquin's approach. They figured out a way to have both by using this really well-designed zoning system. There are areas strictly for recreation, others that are completely untouched wilderness, and then specific zones where logging is allowed.
So it's like they've split the park up so that everything has its own space and no one thing takes over everything else.
Precisely. And of course, it's not perfect, but it's a good example of approaching things holistically, thinking about all the different needs, both human and, well, non-human.
It shows that conservation and economic activity don't always have to be at odds. Sometimes they can actually work together, which is a good thing, but it doesn't always work out that way. Your research also brought up a much more, well, depressing example of what happens when we don't get it right: the collapse of the Atlantic cod fishery.
It's a stark reminder that even resources we think of as endlessly renewable have their limits. We keep coming back to this idea of sustainable yield for a reason, you know?
Right, making sure we're not taking more than can be replenished. And it seems like with the cod, we completely ignored that, right? Just went all out until there was almost nothing left.
Exactly. And your research really emphasized just how devastating it was, not just for the cod populations, but for the entire ecosystem and all those communities that depended on the fishery.
It's heartbreaking, honestly, but also, I think, a really important reminder that we have to learn from these mistakes. We can't just keep assuming that abundance will last forever.
I agree. We need proactive management, a deep understanding of these ecosystems, and a willingness to adapt our practices as things change. It's a tall order, for sure.
Yeah, definitely easier said than done. But hey, you know what? I am suddenly starving. How about we grab some lunch and dive back into this? I'm thinking sustainably sourced seafood. So that cod story is pretty bleak. Makes you wonder, is there any hope for sustainable fishing? Or are we doomed to just keep repeating these mistakes?
You know, it's not all doom and gloom. Your research highlights some really promising strategies for sustainable fishing. And it starts with understanding this idea of carrying capacity.
Carrying capacity, that sounds kind of sciencey, like biology class flashbacks.
It is science, but it's pretty straightforward. Basically, it's the maximum number of, in this case, fish that a certain environment can handle. Like, think of an aquarium, right? You can only have so many fish in there before you start having problems.
Right, the water gets all yucky, the fish get sick, too many fish, not enough resources.
Exactly. And our oceans are kind of like that. Aquarium overfishing pushes things past the carrying capacity, which leads to those collapses we've been talking about. So how do we avoid that? Responsible fishing quotas are key, making sure we're only catching what the ecosystem can handle.
So, like, setting a budget for how many fish we can take from the ocean, but based on science, not just, like, random guesswork.
Exactly. We need to keep track of what's happening with the fish populations and adjust those quotas as needed. And it's not just about how much we catch, but also how we do it. Your research mentioned protecting fish habitats, which makes sense.
Yeah, like those areas where fish, hang out, lay their eggs, all that. Got to protect those, right?
Those are crucial. And we need to minimize the damage from things like bottom trawling, which honestly sounds super destructive, like dragging a giant net across the ocean floor.
Yikes. Not exactly a delicate touch, is it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
And then there's the issue of illegal fishing, which really undermines all the other efforts.
Right, because if some people are cheating the system, it's not really a system anymore, is it?
Exactly. We need global cooperation, stricter rules, and ways to track what's actually happening out there on the water. It's a huge challenge, but there are things we can do as consumers too, right?
Right. Okay, so if I'm at the grocery store trying to buy sustainable seafood, what should I be looking for?
You've probably seen that little blue fish logo, the Marine Stewardship Council, the MSC.
Oh, yeah, I always try to buy stuff with that label, but I'll be honest, I don't actually know that much about it.
It's similar to that FSC logo we talked about for forests. The MSC certifies fisheries that meet certain sustainability standards. So by buying seafood with that label, you're supporting those practices.
Okay, so it's like voting with your dollars, but instead of for, like, politicians, it's for sustainable fisheries. I like that.
It all comes back to that idea of balance,
Mhm.
sustained yield. It's not about eliminating our impact, because we all got to eat right, But we need to find ways to coexist to make sure these resources are still here for future generations.
Totally. It's realizing that we're all part of this big, messy, interconnected system, and our choices actually matter. We're not just along for the ride, we actually have a say in how things go.
Exactly.
So next time you're staring at that wall of frozen fish at the store, skip the orange ruff and go for that MSC certified salmon. Your choices have an impact. And on that note, deep divers, that's a wrap on this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground here, but the conversation doesn't stop here, right? Keep learning, keep asking those questions, and keep making those small choices that add up to a healthier planet for everyone. Catch you next time.